At my brother's wedding, my parents demanded my penthouse, and my dad slapped me in front of everyone. The music didn't stop, but it faltered. A violent note slipped off key just long enough for 200 guests to fall silent. My cheeks stung. The eye. Taste of blood hit me sharp metallic. Somewhere behind me, champagne flutes shattered against marble. I didn't move. Not at first. I'm 30 years old, and 5 seconds ago my father, retired Marine, king of control, slapped me across the face. "You selfish little girl," he hissed, bourbon-laced breath hot against my skin. "After everything we've done for you," my mother's face went pale, not from concern, but from embarrassment. She glanced at the frozen photographers near the head table. And my brother, the groom, you just smirked, didn't rise, didn't flinch. Minutes earlier, they had cornered me by the dessert table. "You should hand over the penthouse," my mother whispered. "Nathan and his wife need space to start their life." I said no calmly, directly. I worked 60-hour weeks, skipped vacations, coded through nights to buy that place. It was mine, and now they wanted it for him. So when I refused, my father hit me, in front of everyone. I blinked once, then smiled. Not out of grace, out of clarity. "You'll regret this," I said loud enough for the entire room to hear. Then I turned and walked out. No one followed. I didn't go home. That place was too loud with memories. Instead, I walked into a near-empty cafe. Juniper and Black, my old sanctuary. Mark, the barista, looked up. His expression shifted. "You okay?" My father slapped me at my brother's wedding because I wouldn't give them my penthouse. He didn't speak, just slid me my usual coffee and a muffin. "You look like you need it." I sat by the window, my chest cracked open. But I didn't cry from pain. I cried from fury. They called me selfish. But for years, I sacrificed. I showed up. Paid my own way. Built a life from nothing. And now they wanted the only thing I built alone. So I made a decision. Not revenge, just boundaries. Legal, permanent, quiet. The next morning, they showed up at my door. My father grabbed my arm. "Don't take that tone with us. Touch me again and I'll call security." He froze. "There are cameras at the venue. Multiple angles." They blinked, confused, like they were just realizing I wasn't the girl they used to corner into giving in. I ignored their calls, their texts. Instead, I opened 3 tabs. My lawyer, my financial advisor, and a luxury apartment complex listing. My brother and his wife once drooled over Hollow Shore residences. They couldn't afford it, but I could. I didn't just make an offer on a unit. I made an offer on the entire building. Within a week, my name was on every deed. I didn't gloat. I waited. They stopped paying rent, ignored notices. Then one day, they were evicted. Quiet, legal. The notice signed by me. My brother texted, "You can't prove anything." So I sent him a screenshot. Server logs. His name. His access ID timestamped. She replied, "What do you want?" I wrote, "Distance. Total distance." Then I archived the conversation. Weeks later, there was a knock at my door. My father alone. "They're moving back in with us." He muttered. "Mathan and his wife, they lost everything." "I know," I said flatly. "I own the building." He blinked. "But how?" "Because I'm good at what?" "I do. Always was, you just never saw it." He looked down. "I was wrong," he said. "About you. About everything." I didn't speak. He handed me an envelope. "Your mother wants you at her birthday dinner, family only." I took it. Closed the door. I went late in black. I spoke to no one. No one dared give me orders. A few months later, I hosted a dinner on my own balcony, my penthouse. There was wine, laughter, and jazz playing soft in the background. Mark raised his glass. To the woman who turned a slap into an empire, I smiled. The memory of that slap still burned, but what burned hotter was the fire it ignited inside me. A fire to never be controlled, never be erased again. I'd spent years fighting for every inch of my life, working 60-hour weeks, making sacrifices that no one saw. That penthouse wasn't just an address, It was proof I could build something on my own, without their approval or interference. When my father grabbed my arm that morning, the familiar weight of his control tried to settle over me like a shadow. But the cameras at the wedding had documented everything. For once, I held the upper hand. The calculated moves I made in the days after the wedding were born not from spite, but from survival. Legal maneuvers, financial planning, and cold, quiet resolve. I didn't need to broadcast my victory. I just needed to protect what was mine and set clear boundaries with the family who refused to respect me. Evicting them was painful in ways I hadn't anticipated. Watching my brother and his wife pack up their things, silenced by their own choices, was bittersweet. The text messages were blunt, their denials hollow. But the evidence was clear, and my resolve unwavering. When my father showed up at my door weeks later, humbled and defeated, it wasn't victory I craved. It was acknowledgement. And with those simple words, I was wrong. I felt a measure of justice. The envelope he handed me was a fragile olive branch. My mother's birthday dinner invitation, a family-only affair, felt like a test. I accepted, but I went on my own terms. Dressed in black, quiet, dignified. No speeches, no bows. Just presence. I didn't speak to anyone except the few who dared treat me not as the black sheep, but as the woman who had claimed her space. Months later, sitting on my balcony, sipping wine as jazz music played softly in the background, I realized how far I had come. Mark raised his glass to me, his eyes full of admiration. To the woman who turned a slap into an empire. I smiled, feeling something I'd never truly felt before. Pride, not just in what I'd built, but in who I had become. The woman who once was controlled, dismissed, and attacked had risen from the ashes. She was stronger, wiser, and finally, free. Because sometimes the hardest battles forge the fiercest warriors, and this was just the beginning. Story. I wasn't invited to my daughter's wedding in Paris, the same wedding I helped pay for. She told me by email, if you want to be a part of it, you can watch through the Google Earth window. LOL. So I just said, sure, enjoy your big day. The next morning, she wouldn't stop calling me. But me, I was way too busy to pick up. Chapter by Yaitsai. 1. The email that broke something in me. I still remember the exact time it hit my inbox. 10:37 p.m. I had just come in from my evening walk, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down to check emails amid bills, bank statements, and a newsletter I never signed up for. There it was. Subject, no hard feelings, Dad. I clicked. Hi, Dad. I just wanted to let you know that Brandon and I are officially tying the knot in Paris next month. The chateau is booked. The guests are confirmed, and I'm so excited to marry the, man of my dreams surrounded by people who truly matter. I know weddings can be awkward, so we decided not to invite you. It's nothing personal, just keeping things stress-free. If you really want to be part of it, maybe watch the chateau on Google Earth. You might catch a glimpse of the fun, Lowell. Take care, Emily. No invite, no explanation, just a passive-aggressive laugh and a digital pat on the head like I was some forgotten ex-colleague. What stung the most? I paid for that chateau, $47,000. When she and Brandon couldn't make the down payment, guess who wired the money within an hour? Me. Because I believed I was investing in her happiness, in her future. I didn't reply, I didn't scream, I didn't even cry. I just sat back, stared at the email, and smiled. Because something inside me shifted that night. A part of me stopped being a father who begged for inclusion and started being a man who plots very patiently. Chapter 2. The calm before my storm. I didn't call her, didn't ask why, didn't demand answers because deep down, I already knew. Ever since Brandon came into her life, Emily had slowly changed. The affection in her voice dulled. The gratitude vanished. What used to be thanks, Dad became, well, you should have done that anyway. She stopped calling me after her mother passed away. The only time I heard from her was when money was involved, but I still wired it every single time. That was my mistake. So when she finally showed her true colors with that email, I realized I wasn't part of her new world. I was just the ATM she used to fund it. so I got to work. First, I pulled every receipt, every wire, and every invoice from the past 3 years. I wasn't just funding the chateau. I had paid for their apartment's down payment. Brandon's startup that never materialized. Her wedding dress, deposit, flights, furniture, and even a designer dog for her Instagram. Over $142,000 in total. You'd think that would have bought me a seat at the table. Apparently not. Next, I called up an old contact in Paris, Jacques, a lawyer I once helped when he got scammed by a tech vendor. Jacques owed me a favor. Can you confirm if Chateau d'Essieu Ballure is booked under my name? There was a pause on the line. Then he replied, Yes, it is. You paid for it in full. They haven't transferred ownership yet. Why? Because I said, we're going to make a few changes. I spent the next 5 days legally transferring the reservation out of Emily and Brandon's name since they never had the authority to use it in the first place, and instead, I leased the venue to an international fashion brand filming a campaign that same weekend for a profit. The cancellation clause, brutal. The clause for guests traveling, internationally with no event to attend, even worse. But I wasn't done yet. I booked a quiet trip for myself the same weekend somewhere with no Wi-Fi, no cell service, just peace, because I wanted her panic to echo in silence. Chapter 3. The Wedding That Never Was. Emily arrived at Chateau de Velour in a white vintage Rolls-Royce, veil perfectly pinned, champagne flute in hand. Brandon sat beside her, smug as ever in a rented tux. Her phone was buzzing. Congratulatory texts, tags, and Instagram stories from her influencer friends already at the gates. But something was wrong. The moment they pulled up, the valet didn't open the door. Instead, a security guard approached with a clipboard. Names: Emily Thompson. Bride, she said proudly. The guard blinked. There's no event under that name. This chateau has been booked for the weekend by Maison Valence, a private fashion shoot. No guests allowed. Brandon leaned forward. No, there must be a mistake. We paid. Correction, the guard replied. Someone paid, but it wasn't you. Ownership and reservation rights reverted back to the payer 4 days ago. The shoot began this morning. At that moment, a crowd of models and film crew swept past, shutters clicking. A world-renowned photographer barked instructions in French, and just behind them, towering floral arrangements and custom signage read, Private event, no trespassing. Emily's cheeks went pale. No, this is my wedding venue, she screamed. Cameras from her influencer friends were already rolling, and when they asked, Wait, what's happening? Where are the guests supposed to go? Panic started to ripple. One friend whispered, Why didn't your dad show up? Isn't this his place? Emily fumbled her phone from her clutch. She called me. I didn't pick up. She called again and again. 11 missed calls by noon. Back at my peaceful mountain retreat, completely off-grid, I leaned back with a cup of hot coffee and smiled. She had mocked me in that email, told me to watch through Google Earth. Well, now the only ones watching were her guests watching her fall apart. And the best part, that wasn't even the full revenge because the money trail, the contracts, and Brandon's shady startup funding were about to come back into play legally. But for now, let her stew in public humiliation. Chapter 4. When the house of cards collapsed by 2 p.m., Emily and Brandon were sitting in their limo parked along a rural French road, sweating, humiliated, and silent. Her mascara had smeared from frustrated tears. His phone was dead from constant. Calls from vendors, videographers, florists, and worst of all, their guests. Why did your dad cancel everything? Brandon finally snapped. He didn't cancel anything. He paid for it. At least I thought he did, Emily muttered, fingers trembling, as she opened her email. She pulled up the wedding contracts, venue, catering, photography, all confirmed, all prepaid until she opened the latest updates. Client: Emily Thompson. Contract void transferred to original pay per clause 4B, and under that payee name, Michael Thompson. Her heart sank. Brandon leaned over her shoulder. Wait, he owns this venue? She turned slowly. Not just the venue. I did say I was too busy to pick up, didn't I? I was meeting with my lawyer and with the forensic accountant I'd hired 6 months ago when Emily began hiding financial moves, opening secret credit cards, and funneling joint account money into a side business under Brandon's name. She thought. I hadn't noticed, but I had built that business, funded every dollar of it, set it up in my name, and before I signed anything over, I embedded full control clauses into the operating agreements. Brandon's new company. Yeah, it was mine. Back at the chateau, the crew was packing up. I had personally called the photographer and offered the location as a favor, free of charge. My only request? Make sure no one dressed like a bride gets into the shots. That evening, Emily posted a cryptic story. Sometimes people betray you in ways you never expected. I'll be taking a break from social media for a while. Brandon. His LinkedIn profile vanished the next day. His tech venture collapsed when all bank accounts were frozen under court order pending legal ownership clarification. And me? I went hiking. In the Swiss Alps alone, peacefully. My daughter had mocked me, disrespected my role in her life, and weaponized her privilege. I hadn't raised her to be like this, but I sure as hell wouldn't finance it. Now she knew what it felt like to lose. Everything in one elegant, silent stroke. Epilogue. A new chapter without her 6 months later. I sat on the porch of my cabin, a warm mug in hand, watching the sunset stretch over the pine-covered hills of Vermont. There was no noise here, no drama, no passive-aggressive emails, just peace. A soft buzz from my phone interrupted the moment. Emily again. She'd tried everything since that disastrous wedding. Apologies, long-winded voice notes, even an old childhood photo of us with the caption, "Can we go back to this?" But the damage was done. She had disrespected me, used me, and publicly ridiculed the man who had spent decades sacrificing for her. I tried to raise her right, but she let entitlement and ego rot her core. She and Brandon had broken up too. Weeks after the fiasco. Apparently, when the money dried up, so did the love. He blamed her for everything. She blamed me and the internet. Oh, they had a field day. A guest had recorded the entire meltdown and uploaded it on TikTok. It went viral. Bride gets left at her own wedding after mocking her dad, then finds out he owns the venue. 3 million views and counting. In one final message, she wrote, "Dad, I was wrong. I don't want money. I want my father back. Please." I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. After a long breath, I replied, "When you value people over appearances, we can talk." Then I set the phone down and turned back to the sunset because forgiveness takes time, and sometimes peace is worth more than Paris. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you would have done in the comments below. Like the story, share it with someone who needs this energy, and subscribe to Revenge Exposed for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice. Because here, every lie has its reckoning, and every betrayal finds its shadow. Stay sharp, stay strong, and stay tuned.